Excellences, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues,
Bienvenue.
tere tulemast!
Welcome to the 8th International Conference on Cyber Conflict. My name is Anna-Maria Osula,
And my name is Pascal Brongetto.
and we are very glad to welcome you all here in Tallinn on behalf of the organizing team.
Since its humble beginnings in 2009, CyCon has grown from a sweet infant to a somewhat chubby youngster.
And the figures speak for themselves. We have full house like last year's, more than 500 participants from 40 different countries.
Thank you for choosing CyCon and making this conference series a tremendous success.
And without further ado, we are very glad to invite here on the stage Mr. Sven Sakov, the Director of NATO CCD COE, to deliver his very first CyCon opening remarks.
Sven, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. President, ministers, admirals, generals, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, CyCon. As previously said, raised to a chubby teenager. I will start my short story in 1st of November 1911. That happened during the Italian-Turkish War. Italian pilot called Giulio Gavotti smuggled 4 hand grenades into his monoplane, did not tell his superiors, did not ask for permission, and he dropped those 4 2-kilogram hand grenades over a Turkish military camp in Libya. 1st of November 1911. Then came the First World War. Air power was growing in importance. Only 7 years after Giulio Gavotti dropped his bombs, grenades, in November 1918, the father of the United States Air Force, General Billy Mitchell, said the following: "The day has passed when armies on the ground or navies on the sea can be the arbiter of a nation's destiny in war. The main power of defense and the power of initiative against an enemy has passed to the air." Then, of course, flash forward 2 decades, and air power was used against the enemy's center of gravity, bombing capital cities, bombing industrial heartlands. When Giulio Gavotti dropped his bombs, Turks were furious. They accused Italy of ungentlemanly warfare. They even filed a complaint pursuant to a 1899 Hague Convention, which had prohibited aerial bombardment from the balloons. The Italian government, of course, said that, hey, no problem, those were not balloons, that was aircraft, heavier than air. And even despite what General Billy Mitchell said, air power was integrated into military effort, but it did not replace armies on the ground or navies on the sea. That just became another domain of warfare. The subtitle of this year's CyCon is Cyber Power. We will have a cyber commanders panel this morning featuring French, British, and Dutch cyber commanders. Educated guess has it that NATO heads and state and government who will be gathering in Warsaw for a summit in about 1 month's time will recognize that cyber has evolved into a domain of warfare. We will have at CyCon this afternoon one of the side events dedicated to NATO, Warsaw, and beyond. Of course, cyber power is not merely about military power. It's not only hard, it's also soft. The soft power of persuasion, the soft power of leading by example. I think something I would say as an Estonian citizen, where Estonia, despite its size, is a superpower. Tomorrow afternoon, after the end of a last session tomorrow, there will be an optional event called e-Estonia, the epic story of e-state. Those of you, and I'm sure it's most of you, who are interested in how Estonia does e-governance, e-services, this event would be a good match for you. Now, some words about NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, CCDCOE. I guess that many of you actually know CCDCOE only because of a CyCon, because you're regular here. I do not know how much you know what else we do, because of course, conference is just one event in the year. We, and I mean 18 countries which have set up the center, soon there will be 20. We, at the center, we research, mostly in terms of volume technical research on technology, but also on law, on strategy, on politics. We then try to apply that research into training. We are a major training provider for NATO nations and the nations who have set us the center up. Mostly technical training in all different disciplines like forensic and so forth, but also course on international law, also operation level course for operational planners. We conduct every spring, this year it was in April, the exercise called Locked Shields, which is the largest, most complex and most comprehensive live-fire international cyber exercise in the world. It's a very fun event where, and I think this is probably the only exercise in the world where you just are not allowed to wear a t-shirt, but you have to wear a t-shirt. Because the teams, different teams are colored. Of course, the blue team, the defending side, is blue. We have attackers, the red team, yellow team for situation awareness, green team, infrastructure people have set it all up, and the white team, exercise control, charges, and so forth. This year, 20 teams took part. We announced only first 3. I'm very happy to say also here that this year's event was won by Slovakia, Slovakian blue team. We support NATO. We are not a NATO organization per se, but we are accredited by NATO, and we of course support NATO when so requested. Mostly when it comes to NATO exercises at technical, tactical, or operational or strategic level, including the biggest NATO cyber exercise, Cyber Coalition. And of course, we have this CyCon, which is, I think, one of the great cyber events in the yearly calendar of mankind. And of course, I'm a bit biased in saying that. During those 2.5 days, which are ahead of us, we have, besides what I already told you, a lot. We'll have panels on encryption, on aviation, on information warfare, on international law, etc. We will have many speakers who are household names in a crowd like this one, like Thomas Reid, Martin Libitsky, Mikko Hyppönen, or David Sanger, Jason Healy, or Jan Tailin. Of course, as always, as every time, we will have President of Estonia, Toomas Hendrik Ilves. A bit sad is this year's CyCon because this will be the last for him as the President of Estonia, President of the Republic of Estonia. Has been a great supporter of the Center and CyCon. Mr. President, always welcoming back as a private citizen, President Ilves, in all the future CyCons what you can take. To recognize President Ilves' contribution to a debate, global debate on cybersecurity, we have also offered him not just a keynote, which is a standard, but also a President's panel tomorrow. Stay tuned, that will happen tomorrow in the morning. But now, without further ado, I will give you President Toomas Hendrik Ilves of Estonia. President, please.
water, too, in the morning. Anyway, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Welcome to CyCon. As Sven nicely said, my last one. And he's actually quite happy about that. Thank God he's leaving. Anyway, it's good to see you all here. Dealing with one of, I think, the most important topics in security. When we speak of power in military and security terms in the digital world, we invariably recognize that this world itself began in the military research domain. Be it Alan Turing during the Second World War, working on decrypting Enigma, or the origins of the web in DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, we recognize that, like with so many technological innovations, the digital world originated actually in the defense establishment. Then again, so what? For it would be a mistake to confuse etiology with contemporary use, just as the fact that we know that NASA sponsored the development of Velcro. You don't really think about it every time you put on your running shoes. So, yes, it does come out of the military, but it has permeated virtually all aspects of our lives. For while we here all know that the digital world is increasingly a battlefield where state and non-state actors, nations, criminals, and terrorists, sometimes in collusion or in novel public-private partnerships, as is often the case with mafia-run botnets rendering themselves to nation-states, it's an explosive development, is a result of the explosive development of the web, and for military espionage and extortion ends. But in many ways, the defense establishment has become the tail of the dog, because in fact, most of the time targets are not military. Although everything we call cyber began with military research, the military side does not occupy the minds of those millions of people involved in all things digital, except at conferences like these. Indeed, the military, as opposed to the criminal side of cyber, wasn't taken seriously at all as late as 9 years ago, when Estonia was subjected to what is considered the first Clausewitzian continuation of policy by digital means. Indeed, if you go a mile down the road today to our major annual startup conference, Latitude 59, you'll find plenty of young innovators working on Internet of Things, smart health, and so on, whose thoughts are far removed from the military and defense matters that are discussed at this conference. Not that digital means, when I think of the Clausewitzian developments here, had not been used before 2007 to achieve military or political ends, but the 2007 massive DDoS attacks on Estonia are considered the first case of an attack by one country against another. Back then, though, we were told not even to think of invoking Article 4, let alone 5, of the North Atlantic Treaty. And as Sven mentioned, 9 years later, on the eve of the Warsaw Summit, just as an example of how much attitudes have changed, we anticipate, meaning we're not sure, but it's kind of leaning in that direction, that cyber will be named as the fifth domain of warfare after land, air, sea, and space, which shows how much thinking has changed in less than a decade. Of course, on the other end, is cyber a domain? Because what we call cyber, given the massive use of digital systems, actually permeates virtually everything, be it land, air, sea, and of course, space. While While I can't but welcome this development and this understanding that digital means can be just as effective militarily as kinetic means, or more bluntly, that some lines of code can just as effectively knock out a power plant as a missile, I nonetheless believe that we are putting the cart, or those of you who are military, putting the caisson before the horse. That I think only works for American military. But anyway, if we look at defense, to talk about why it is the caisson before the horse, if we look at defense, this is a national prerogative. Cyber defense, even more so, is a national prerogative. For while allies strive for the interoperability of kinetic weapon systems so that a British missile should be mountable under the wing of a French Mirage jet, for example, cyber defense has no such requirements. Presented on this, for years actually, on this stage, when it comes to cyber, we find ourselves rather in intelligence agency mode, where we share as little as possible and only when necessary. Not that NATO does not share, but not in ways outsiders think. NATO's Cooperative Center of Excellence for Cyber Defense, as Sven mentioned, and which he leads, headquartered here in Tallinn, focuses on research and development of technology and concepts and in legal issues. NATO's NCIRC only works on NATO's own cyber defense, that is defending the organization's own networks. It's kind of like the military police. They don't go around worrying about street crime, they worry about what goes on within the military. So there is no joint NATO cyber capability, still no NATO cyber operations. NATO's main cyber efforts, however, remain focused on military defense of the organization itself, while recognizing the importance of civilian networks and the risks that they face. NATO lacks the legal or policy levers to address these questions directly. At the supranational level also, the European Union has begun to deal with cybersecurity, supplementing or superseding member state policies in a number of areas, including those related to economic justice and home affairs. While national governments guard their sovereignty in the areas of defense and foreign policy, the EU maintains some limited authority in these areas. In fact, the EU is developing a considerable role in shaping the European cybersecurity landscape, primarily through legislation and expenditures related to economic regulation, individual rights, and internal security. Some progress is being made on threats that are supernatural. Supernatural is going to be the sixth domain, but let us think through what it is that we are talking about when we talk about keeping our networks and systems safe. Which systems? We worry first and foremost about civilian and commercial networks. We worry about power grids and traffic control systems, hospitals. We worry about banks and financial markets, credit cards, personal data records. All of these have come under attack. Serious or large-scale damage to these in the digital age can, in fact, have disastrous consequences for our populations and our economies. And I would argue that national defense, which is a national prerogative, I repeat, is something which has been traditionally designed to prevent those things. But then again, these kinds of disastrous effect don't fall under the purview of national defense institutions. In addition to what I mentioned, we also have IoT, machines talking to machines, chips talking to chips. The worries of the broader public, which focus on such issues as privacy, pale, indeed are minuscule, compared to the damage that can be wrought with attacks on data integrity, an issue that all of us need to explain better than we have. I would say, as in a personal side, I mean, I constantly have to deal with people, legislators, politicians, who worry first and foremost about privacy, which is a legitimate concern. But I say, but folks, you know, data integrity is a lot worse. And most of them have never even heard of data integrity, so I explain it simply as, I may not like it if someone knows my blood type, but if in the records my blood type is changed, that's data integrity, that's a lot worse. So maybe you can take from the speech at least that one little thing to convince our policymakers that more attention needs to be paid to data integrity. And as I said, we do need to explain this not only to publics that are worried about, you know, the bad NSA coming and reading the mails of bohemian poets to their girlfriends, which they're not doing, and worry a lot more about data integrity. But you people here know all of this, and there's no need for me to repeat it. What I would like to draw your attention to, though, is that almost all of the systems, these systems whose security worry about are in fact commercial products, both software and hardware. Companies, banks, municipal SCADA systems, IoT-based cars, refrigerators, manufacturing processes are all vulnerable, and the more modern, the more digitized, the less legacy-based the system, the more vulnerable. And they're all using commercial. In other words, we are concerned about commercial software and hardware produced by multinational or international companies. The same Microsoft or SAP or Oracle software, and Intel, Alcatel, HP or Huawei hardware is used the world over. So through the years, especially in this forum, I've asked the question of whether the Westphalian state system can still work in a digital 21st century. Historically, as I started saying in the beginning, our security has been implemented and guaranteed by national territorial units, also known as states. Today, however, in the digital world, the digital domain, the most fundamental aspects of our security represent an intimate and inextricable intertwining of the state and the private sector. And the private sector has a different set of concerns. With commercial products, security considerations are driven by the bottom line. And these companies may be headquartered in Palo Alto, Beijing, Waldorf, but their customers span the globe. So they may care about security, but they need to care about the security of their customers across the world. So it would be unsurprising to see situations where companies and governments pursuing the same aims ultimately disagree about how to achieve security. Witness the showdown between Apple and the FBI over unlocking an encrypted iPhone. Two actors opposed to one another, but ultimately committed to security, but with very different visions of how to get there. Usually, I end up talking about, when we talk about this topic, end up talking about PPP, public-private partnerships, governments working together with the private sector. Yet, as I mentioned, the private sector is multinational and international. Privacy, integrity, and security concerns are historically strictly national. How do we square this circle? This is a problem that we haven't solved, and I would say we will need to do that. So far, when we have seen conflicts between IT companies and states, they have been primarily about taxation or extraterritoriality of jurisdiction, as with the US government's purview over data and servers abroad, or in pursuing cyber criminals. but that's really the extent of it. It is a truism, ladies and gentlemen, that in the world of cyber, geography ceases to play a role. All distances are equal. Unlike conventional warfare, there is, in the case of cyber, an equality of threat regardless of distance. All the more so when we overwhelmingly use software and hardware sold and used around the world. With hard and software used around the world and territorially based states responsible for the security of systems used in those states, we clearly have a problem with suggestions for closer cooperation between the government and the private sector. Unless, of course, states get together to work with the private sector. And this to solve those thorny and jurisdictional issues, to look at the security of supply chains and so forth, or to issue warnings when one country discovers a zero-day exploit or a new worm and so forth. Clearly, this is difficult, especially when we consider authoritarian and undemocratic regimes. NATO, as a group of like-minded and basically value-based nations, could serve this function, but so far hasn't. Locked, as I mentioned, in the espionage rather than interoperability mode. Moreover, it is geographically based, not really useful in the instantaneous, borderless digital world. Where would, in the case of cybersecurity, where we'd have NATO, where would that leave other liberal democratic rule-based societies such as Australia, Japan, South Korea, or even local non-members of NATO, such as local meaning in the neighborhood, members such as Finland, Sweden, and Austria. As the threats that we face in this digital world, why no geography, so why should defense recognize geography? So, thinking about these things, I figure about the closest, and I'm not saying this is a good idea, but just as the kind of thinking we should be developing, I think in the long run, is something like John McCain's, or before that, Madeleine Albright's Community of Democracies. Ideas that were floated in the late 90s and first decade of this century, but without any operational component. It was just this kind of nice idea first from Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State in the Clinton administration, that, well, we shouldn't only have NATO, we should have other democratic countries and bring them together. John McCain suggested the same thing a few years later. And that is, we would have something that wouldn't be NATO, but democracies, I underline democracies, that are concerned about digital security. A club of rule of law-based democratic countries that also certify software and hardware, where membership is a privilege that also carries benefits to those who join, but also carry the responsibility of keeping fellow members of the club informed about what members are saying. I rush to say this is decidedly not a grouping like the conventions proposed in various forms, often by undemocratic and authoritarian countries, that involve inter alia replacing ICANN with the ITU, or with treaties that would limit freedom of expression, indeed even allow for censorship on the World Wide Web. It is not that. I would say, I mean, since I did chair the ICANN Reform Committee, I can say that a lot of people who would like to see the web regulated, and the people who want to regulate them have a pretty poor track record on human rights. That is not what I mean. Because, I mean, this is why I've always been very dubious about any kind of regulation of the web, but I think a voluntary association that would be of use to the liberal democratic world. The democratic and rule of law nature of a country, how democratic and how well rule of law functions, how well human rights are respected, would be the primary consideration for membership. kind of like the Copenhagen criteria that needed to be fulfilled for countries even to begin to be considered for European Union accession. Except we would leave out the geographic dimension of this. The Copenhagen criteria apply to all countries that are geographically on the continent of Europe, however we define that. And we say, well, if you fulfill these criteria, then you can join the European Union. Well, I would say we get rid of the geographic element and say, all of you guys who respect the fundamental rules of liberal democracy may join this security, digital security organization, and no matter where you are. But if you don't fulfill those requirements, well, then too bad. One sort of more or less overlapping constellation already exists, the Budapest Convention, which was originally, as some of you know, the Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime, where signatories obligate themselves to extradite cyber criminals. It was originally the Council of Europe, but then other countries that are not in Europe, United States, Japan, they all said, wow, this is a pretty good idea. We'll also accede to this, so it is now renamed the Budapest Convention because, for the same reasons as I mentioned before, that geography does not play a role in cybercrime. We also don't need to recall, but I will, that the primary sources of cybercrime have been traditionally countries that have refused to accede to the convention. We know who they are. Getting this right, of course, that is getting some kind of broader security cooperation, will be difficult and indeed could be considered utopian. I am not naive. With a quarter century in foreign policy negotiating inter alia Estonia's EU and NATO accession and any number of other agreements, I know full well how difficult it would be to bring together nations to do this. My last page is falling off here, but anyway, what the hell. I can wing it. So I would leave you with this, that we have to try. We have to do something. The current situation, I mean, we've managed to get through till now without the kind of international cooperation on cybersecurity. But this fundamental, well, not conflict, but this contradiction between multinational companies, multinational software, everyone uses the same SAP or Microsoft or whichever software, regardless of country. And then the fact all of us deal with cybersecurity in our own countries and don't really talk to the other guys means that there will inevitably be a conflict. The sort of the international nature of the software world, for example, is best shown by the use of lack of certification of Microsoft software in NGOs in Russia being the cause for shutting down the NGOs because their software had been pirated. I mean, that's a pretty odd form of repression, but it worked and it was used. Finally, ultimately, Microsoft said, no, we forgive those NGOs that are being shut down because they have pirated the software. But nonetheless, software is everywhere. The same hardware is everywhere. Moreover, some of the same hardware is penetrated the same way. There's a wonderful piece just yesterday in Wired about how there are some companies that, or some hardware products that from day one have greater vulnerabilities than they should have. You can check it out, look up Wired, there it is. So in this world of great insecurity, the good guys, liberal democratic societies that believe in freedom of speech, rule of law, all of that stuff that makes us what we are, better get together because otherwise we'll be facing some real messes. I thank you. I wish you all a wonderful conference and see you next year, but with a different name and title.
Well, Mr. President, the rumor has it that from, I think, 11th of October, you might have a bit more free time at your hand than last 10 years. One thing what we recommend is to take up gardening. This is a wonderful creation. You can see it in that corner. It's called Click and Grow. You basically add water and electricity and click, and it grows. Of course, it has its own app. You can name the plants and so forth. Mr. President, thank you very much for supporting CyCon this year and all the previous years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sven. As a commercial break, I say this is indeed an Estonian company. Used to be a startup, now it's a worldwide, it's no longer a startup, but it's not yet a unicorn. I would also point out that the general tradition of former presidents is to take up painting bad paintings.
Yeah, right. Now, thank you, Mr. President. Now we will be moving on. I will ask my old friend, Minister of Defense, Hannes Hanso, to come on stage and introduce his colleague from Czech Republic. Hannes, please.
Good morning, and first, Mr. President, this time around, and then next time around, Mr. Ex-President, the former President, my dear colleague from Czech Republic, esteemed guests, friends. Well, I'm not quite as shy as Sven was when he said, he might be biased when he said it was the best conference of a kind in the world. It is, and let me welcome you to that best conference in cyber. And Cyber Center of Excellence in Tallinn, of course, has yet managed to arrange an impressive program and even more impressive list of speakers. Of course, when we speak about cyber, we speak on a daily basis about this stuff in various different contexts, from stealing money from banks and hijacking vehicles to virtual reality and developing artificial intelligence. While cyber and ICT is giving way to new threats and, I think, exposes some serious vulnerabilities, it also enables us to achieve innovation and progress. It is an integral part of our modern-day defense systems. We all acknowledge that cyber defense is also gaining more prominence in NATO and NATO's context. And I anticipate that we will declare cyber a different or separate domain at the upcoming NATO summit in Warsaw already in 5-6 weeks' time. Indeed, if we look at our recent past, we haven't seen any conventional conflicts without an element of cyber being involved. But declarations themselves are mere words on a paper. What we will do with these words, how we will develop credible cyber policies and actions, both within NATO but also amongst like-minded countries, is, I think, not only a challenge but also a solution to many of our problems, and it will all shape our collective defense for the future. As there are more and more conflicts surrounding us, we need to prepare ourselves and be prepared on all fronts, many of which will go, of course, far beyond hard defense and military. But now, let me welcome my good colleague, His Excellency Mr. Martin Stropniczky, Minister of Defense of the Czech Republic, to the stage. In my notes here, it says Mr. Stropniczky has had an impressive career in diplomacy as an ambassador to Portugal, Italy, and to the Holy See. but also I know he has a distinguished career as an actor. He holds his current position as a Minister of Defense for the last 2.5 years. I'm looking forward to our discussions this afternoon, and also I'm looking forward to an excellent Warsaw Summit. We have a lot at stake there. But now, Mr. Minister, dear colleague, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
The best actors are in politics. Mr. President, dear colleague, Excellencies, Generals, distinguished guests, first of all, I would like to thank the Cyber Defense Center of Excellence for organizing this important event and for giving me the opportunity to speak here. This conference is one of the biggest events of its kind globally, and it represents a unique platform where decision makers as well as experts from military, industry and academia can meet to discuss modern, legal, technical and strategic trends in cyber. It's my pleasure and honor to be able to open this conference this year along with Mr. President and Admiral Nielsen, as far as I know. Thank you. I also appreciate this year's theme of cyber power, as I consider it to be highly topical. The concept of power will play a never more important role in cyberspace, and it is high time to pay proper attention to it. As a matter of fact, cyber attacks are no more limited to cyberspace, but are moving their power projection to the physical world as well. Not only that cyber attacks are often part of conventional warfare, but cyberspace is also becoming a source of various kinds of attacks against society's integrity, be it just a simple dissemination of disinformation or an integral part of a coherent hybrid campaign. Therefore, cyberspace is developing into a potentially dangerous tool which adversaries can misuse to blur the fragile border between peace and war in order to gain strategic advantage over their victim. Recent events in Ukraine illustrate that this is a fact. Last December, 2 power distribution companies in the country were hacked and electricity to more than 80,000 people cut. A year before, one day before Ukrainian parliamentary elections, hackers accessed electronic billboards in Kiev. Using them, they displayed images of what they falsely portrayed as a civilian massacre carried out by Ukrainian forces. In fact, it was an old picture from the Chechnya war, unrelated to the current events in Ukraine. The 2 incidents originating in cyberspace might seem mutually unrelated. However, it is more likely that they were parts of a long-term effort to undermine Ukrainian society's moral and unity. These events are not limited only to Ukraine, of course. Cyber factor starts to play a crucial role in hybrid campaigns, where conventional instruments meet non-conventional ones and create a dangerous asymmetric environment for confrontation. Spreading disinformation with the aim to subvert the population's trust in the political system and undermine societal cohesion is a powerful weapon. We should face this seriously. Related strategic communication needs to be properly developed and supported by various state institutions and bodies, including those that have not been traditionally part of security and defense efforts. One example is the need for a deeper involvement of relevant industry sectors in facing hybrid threats. Enhancing resilience against cyber threats and, by extension, hybrid threats is becoming a priority for governments across the transatlantic area. The Czech Republic is no exception. Our political will to defend ourselves against cyber threats is anchored both in our national legislation, such as the Act on Cybersecurity, and in our strategic documents, such as the National Cybersecurity Strategy. This document expresses the ambition of the Czech Republic to become one of the leading nations in cybersecurity in Europe. And we do work hard to fulfill our aspirations. In 2012, our National Cybersecurity Center was established with the aim to provide immediate response to cyber incidents. When it comes specifically to cyber defense, the Ministry of Defense is the main national authority. Within the ministry, the National Cyber Forces Center, a cyber defense unit, is currently being set up. The center will perform a wide range of operations in cyberspace, including supporting international operations of the Czech Armed Forces and, if needed, defending the Czech Republic in cyber domain in case of a hybrid conflict. It is also worth mentioning that the Czech Republic was the very first ally that signed the second generation of the Memorandum of Understanding on Cyber Defense Cooperation with NATO in October last year. As you know, the MOU aims to improve cyber defense cooperation between NATO and national cyber defense authorities and follows the enhanced NATO policy on cyber defense adopted in 2014. At the same time, however, we know that in practice we are still only at the beginning, and we must do much more to be able to defend ourselves in cooperation with our NATO allies in the cyberspace. Recently, we have launched a comprehensive national security audit to assess the readiness of our national security system to respond to the wide range of current threats. Among the areas it seeks to examine are, of course, hybrid threats, including threats in cyberspace. The goal is to determine whether our national legislation and the capacities we have are appropriate. And most importantly, the audit should provide us with recommendations on how resilience of our country could be strengthened in a comprehensive way. We are, of course, well aware of the fact that we need to keep in mind the borderless nature of cyberspace and look beyond our borders. It is no coincidence that this conference takes place here in Estonia and that the Center of Excellence was established properly in Tallinn. Estonia has often been at the forefront of cyber attacks, but we should be prepared for more and more allies being targeted in the cyberspace, and probably with increasing intensity and frequency. We should learn from each other, increase our capabilities, and cooperate very closely. In this context, I would suggest that the frontline allies that are most often targets of cyber attacks coming from beyond the eastern border of NATO create a protective chain within which they would closely cooperate, exchange information, and jointly develop cyber defense capacities. These countries, which have network probes installed in their systems, could join their efforts and connect their outputs in the real time. In this way, they would raise situational awareness and put early warning mechanisms in place, not only within their own borders, but also within the alliance at large. The Warsaw Summit is upon us, and we, the alliance of 28 members, together with our partners, now face crucial decisions, also in the area of cybersecurity and defense. Should the cyberspace be recognized as the fifth operational domain, and I honestly hope it will be, we will have to take the appropriate practical steps in this regard so that the declaration does not end up being an empty statement. In other words, we as the alliance will need to develop appropriate defense capabilities to be used to defend us in the cyber domain. And let me give you at least two examples. First, recognizing cyberspace as the operational domain will bring the need not only to increase budgets for developing cybersecurity and defense capabilities, but also to increase the number of experienced cyber specialists. We have to prepare for this need and start recruiting and educating them immediately. Second, NATO members should support building active cyber defense capacities within their structures. Article 3 of the Washington Treaty clearly states that the parties separately and jointly, by means of continuous and effective self-help and mutual aid, will maintain and develop their individual and collective capacity to resist armed attack. And this obligation will now become applicable to the cyber domain as well. Let's stand by our old commitments and have enough courage to commit ourselves to the new ones related to the rapidly evolving security environment. Developing active cyber defense is among them. NATO, in return, needs to support every positive effort being pursued in the regard by allied nations and partner countries. As always, the alliance is only as strong as is its weakest link. With that, I would like to wish you a productive conference and enjoyable debates with your fellow cyber colleagues. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Minister, thank you very much. Thank you. May you add some basil into your life in a couple of months' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope I will be minister even after October.
Thank you very much.
To conclude our keynote session, we are very pleased to welcome on the stage Admiral Manfred Nielsen. He is currently the Deputy Supreme Allied Commander Transformation in Norfolk. Before being nominated to Deputy SAC-T, Admiral Nielsen has occupied numerous postings during his career as a naval officer. Today, he will share his thoughts regarding cyber and NATO. Admiral Nielsen, the floor is yours.
Terra Omnicus, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry, I will not finish my speech in Estonian, but I would show you that I'm in a position that I try to get rid of the Estonian language. Mr. President, please allow me to heartily thank you for your inspiring speech. Moreover, I feel delighted by your generous hospitality and open-minded welcome we all have enjoyed since our arrival here in Estonia. I have a special relationship to this country, and Tallinn and Estonia has a place in my heart and in my mind. In 1995, I had the opportunity to lead the Open Spirit exercise, and to my memory, it was the first time that an Estonian ship participated in such an international environment. In 2003, I was head of the Naval Academy in Flensburg, and I had the privilege to train cadets from Estonia and other Baltic states. And in 2010, I was Commander-in-Chief of the German fleet, and it was really a pleasure to have a boarding team from Estonia on board of our ships. So for me, it's always a pleasure to be in this beautiful, brave, and proud country. The development of your economy, society, and even military structure has been impressive over the past 2 decades. I believe that your achievements can serve as a great example for others. NATO has been enriched by your membership, and I wish Estonia a prosperous and peaceful future. 2004, Estonia became member of NATO. 2008, the Center of Excellence here in Tallinn starts its work. Today, Tallinn is the heart of NATO's cooperative cyber defense. Your Center of Excellence continuously provides outstanding and important work in enhancing the capability, cooperation, and information sharing among NATO, its member nations, and partners in cyber defense. I would like to reassure you that Allied Command Transformation intends to take full advantage of the knowledge and expertise of this Center of Excellence in the future. Looking at NATO, you will notice an unbelievable amount of activities in line with the increasing threats and activities in cyberspace. Estonia has taken a leading role within NATO and in its upcoming important domain. NATO has come a long way in cyber defense. Our strategies and policies are aligned and updated with the continuously evolving cyberspace. NATO computer incident response capabilities and SHAPE Task Force Cyber have been initiated. A military concept for NATO's cyber defense has been approved. At the World Summit, allies recognized that the impact of a cyber attack could be as harmful to modern societies as a conventional attack, or perhaps even more. It is affirmed that cyber defense is part of NATO's core task of collective defense and emphasized the need to strengthen defensive measures of NATO and of nations. Consequently, NATO is not only focused on the technical aspects of cyber defense. The alliance today takes a much broader and holistic contemplation. People, processes, and technology are the three basic dimensions of our holistic approach. Please allow me to address these three dimensions a little bit more in detail. First, people. NATO has continuously performed an awareness campaign followed by a rigorous lessons learned assessment. We carry out individual and collective training analysis, and we are cooperating with the NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence to close remaining gaps. In addition, we conducted Cyber Coalition 2015 exercise with about 800 people from 34 countries participating. Among them, approximately 10% from industry. NATO performed coalition warrior interoperability, exploration, experimentation, examination exercise CIVIX, discussing the cyber area with 8 nations and providing findings in the field of 12 different capabilities. Allied Command Transformation will continue to incorporate cyber defense in more NATO exercises. We clearly aim for cyber becoming a component in all exercises. Second, processes. Well, first of all, there's a big elephant in the room, the NATO defense planning process. This process provides a framework within which national and alliance defense planning activities can be harmonized to meet agreed targets. Bearing this in mind, we will work hard in the upcoming defense planning cycle to ensure the necessary capability requirements for cyber and to facilitate their development. Furthermore, doctrine for cyber operations will have our close attention. To complement our strategic level guidance, Allied Command Transformation will lead and inform the development of the necessary operational level cyber doctrine in order to share sound doctrine and best practices. This will be referenced in the context of future NATO operations. I would like to close on processes by stressing that partnerships with academia and industry are among the most striving and rapidly developing topics in NATO. This certainly needs to be applied to cyber as well. Cyber cannot be delimited by military perspective. Perhaps it's only the smallest part. Interaction and collaboration with academia and industry in events like this during a tight sprint and within the framework of NATO's cyber industry, partnerships is, from my perspective, a conditio sine qua non. It provides the base from where we need to step forward for mutual benefit in a rapidly evolving and often threatening environment. The final dimension of NATO's cyber-related efforts is technology. As you are aware, NATO has initiated numerous ongoing and complex programs and projects. NATO's computer incident response capability provides centralized network monitoring and computer incident response all over NATO. In addition, I would like to mention some other NATO programs and projects in cyber defense. Federated mission networking, developing NATO cyber range, including unclassified cyber range for experiment and exercises, classified cyber range for strategic commands, and federated cyber range and smart defense project like the malware information sharing platform. I would like to end by guiding your attention to the recognition of cyberspace as a separate domain beside land, maritime, and air, now considered by NATO, and hopefully part of the Warsaw Summit. Accepting cyberspace as a special domain would initiate a NATO-wide shift in mindset and will initiate significant, and some would say overdue, change. To stress the obvious, in the future, we need a more effective information sharing capability and stronger defense against more sophisticated, in a short to long time frame, advanced, persistent threats, including insider threats. And of course, the resilience of our networks to cyber attacks needs to be addressed and improved. We are moving forward with plans to modernize our cryptographic capabilities. We all know that protecting NATO's networks alone will not ensure the continuity of NATO's missions. NATO is dependent upon member nations to fulfill its core task. Allied nations, by my observation, show this commitments in developing their networks and enhancing their cyber capabilities. But we all know there's a long and sometimes difficult way to go. I wish all of us a fruitful, inspiring, and challenging discussions during this conference. Thank you for paying your attention.
Thank you, Admiral, for your insightful remarks. You have your own piece of cyber gardening equipment, so please enjoy it.
Hopefully I will bring it to Norfolk. Thank you very much.
We're running a bit ahead of schedule, but we're coming to the end of this session. So we're back for a few admin remarks before we break for coffee.
And speaking of coffee, it will be served outside in the hallway.
Lunches will also be served in the main hall on the 6th floor here, and also in Café Suisse on the 8th floor. Please use the stairs to reach the 8th floor.
If you are tweeting or want to share anything on social media about the conference, please feel free to use the hashtag CyCon.
And we finally entered the modern era. We now have an app, so please feel free to download it. You can have access to all the information pertaining to the conference, agenda items, bios, etc. There's also feedback functionality. Please do not hesitate to use that as well. We very much look forward to your feedback.
Of course, we have wireless available throughout the conference area, and this year with a very strong password, Tallinn 2016.
We also remind you that there will be city tours tonight for those of you who have registered, and tomorrow evening we'll have the conference dinner.
And if you still feel that you want to enjoy more of Tallinn White Nights, don't hesitate to contact or approach Pascal, who is about to graduate a master course in Tallinn nightlife.
That's actually not true. So should you have any questions, the people walking around with these white lanyards are part of the organizing team, so please feel free to ask them any questions. They will be able to answer your every need.
And also, if you want to brush up your Estonian, then have a look at this small dictionary. It's an Estonian English dictionary, and you never know when you might need the phrase lahe vunts.
Thank you.
Which means nice mustache. Thank you very much. Please enjoy the coffee break, which you have more time now. Get to know your new colleagues. And we meet you back here at 11:10 for the Cyber Commanders panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
sisters and all your brothers. Do your own thing, you don't need no other. Lord, Lord. It's a new generation. It's a new generation. Talking about love. God Almighty, talking about love. Don't be lame, y'all. Got to do your thing. Yeah. Talking about love. We got to love it. A little time. Lord, check out your yeah. Somebody done told me to love my mama. Said the mama done told me you gotta take care of your brother. Somebody said surely, surely, surely. Somebody said surely. Got a lot, Lord, Dr. Shirley talking about. So the sun gonna rise. It's gonna be a brand new day of life, love and love and love. Talking about love.
Hold it. Listen.
Can turn the gray sky blue. I can make it rain whenever I wanted to. Oh, I can build a castle from a single grain of sand. I can make a ship sail on dry land. But my life is incomplete and I'm so blue. 'Cause I can't get next to you. Can't get next to you, baby. Next to you. I just can't get next to you. Next to you, baby. Can't get next to you. I can fly like a bird in the sky. And I can buy anything that money can buy. Oh, I can turn a river into a raging fire. I can live forever without soul desire. Honey, brother, all these things I can do, but I can't get next to you. Can't get next to you, baby. Can't get next to you. Yeah. funky guitar player?
Yeah, I hear that dude, man.
He sure is funky, ain't he,
He
man?
ain't bad as I am.
Yeah, what instrument you play?
Y'all play drums, man.
Yeah, you buying them?
I'm ready to get down on.
Yeah, let me hear what you got.
Dig this.
Yeah.
Hey, Otis.
Yeah, man.
Them guys bet that bad.
Boy, they really doing it right there.
You think we'll put our thing in there?
We better go ahead and do our thing, too, then.
You ready?
Yeah.
Come on.
Just taking time, doing our thing, doing it real, real good. Just taking time, doing our thing, doing it real, real good.
by an incidental smile. Holding on for something else to come along and make my life worthwhile. Till it comes, I'm gonna be okay. Slowly waiting for the end of days. Every night, I'm gonna be alright. The demons come and take care of my pride. I can see in your eyes that what's coming ain't a big surprise. I can see, oh, in your eyes that what's coming ain't a big surprise. Over time, people change. Slowly the world will rearrange. All the while, I keep holding on, trying to find the will to carry on. I can see in your eyes that what's coming ain't a big surprise. I can see, oh, in your eyes that what's coming ain't a big surprise. I just wanna go. Please just let me know. I wanna go. I'd do anything for you, girl. Slowly life will take its toll. I wanna lose control. Life is rain alone for me. Ever since you walked right through the door. Please believe that things will change. But you said you've had it all before. I can see, oh, in your eyes that what's coming ain't a big surprise. I can see, oh, in your eyes that what's coming ain't a big surprise. I can see, oh, in your eyes that what's coming ain't a big surprise. I can see, oh, bring your good thing home. Baby, bring your good thing home.
Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Ha ha! Gang 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 Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Ha ha! Gang 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 Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Blues ain't nothing but a good woman gone bad. Stormy, 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 stormy Monday. Stormy Monday. Stormy Monday. Stormy Monday. Stormy, stormy, stormy raining Monday. Hey now when I'm kissing my love, I hear a thumping in my head. Hey now when I'm kissing my love, I close my eyes and see a pretty city with a million thousand beds. Hey now I can hear the angels sing songs that only angels sing. He's such a heavy thing. I can feel my heart just a thumping and a skipping when I'm kissing my love. Hey now when I'm kissing my love, I feel the blood just a pumping in my veins. Hey now when I'm kissing my love, he's such a tender sender with a strong, strong flame. Oh, bless his name now. He's so good at what he does. All he wanna do is kiss and hug. And he's got me in love. And I can feel my heart just a thumping and a skipping when I'm kissing my love. Oh yeah. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't don't stop. Put your foot on the rock and pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Foot on the rock, pat your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot on the rock. Put your foot, don't stop. Put your foot on the rock. Just a puppet, pumping in my veins. When I'm kissing my love, he's such a tender sender with a strong, strong frame. Ooh, Lord, bless his name now. He's so good at what he does. All he wanna do is kiss and hug. He's got me in love, and I can feel my heart with just a thumping and a skipping. When I'm kissing my love, oh yeah.
See the man on the blacktop highway, moving past a no man's land. All alone on the blacktop highway, moving just as fast as he can. Riding thumb,
papers. Here.
Light changed. Now you can't see anything.
Yeah. Where have they all gone?
Where are they?
You will all have your individual 15 minutes there. I recently banned sparkling water from the center because at every meeting you usually someone is Please find your seats. We will continue in 10 seconds or so with cyber power. Welcome back after coffee break. I hope you are all using the CyCon app. If you are not, check the Century. The password you will find either in your email or at the walls, talking about the app. Now the Cyber Commanders panel. One bad and one good news. The bad news is that General McLaughlin had to cancel his visit. Good news is that Major General Hockenhall from the United Kingdom was gracious enough and quick on his feet to take his position. Thank you very much, James, for that. Yesterday, the center had an honor of hosting and facilitating a Cyber Commanders Forum, cyber commanders from 11 countries. I understand that was actually their second meeting in history. Of course, that analyzes again how important the international cooperation and human contacts are when it comes to cyber. We have an excellent panel today with Vice Admiral Coustillier from France, with Brigadier General Vollmer from the Netherlands, and with Major General Hockenhall from the United Kingdom. I will ask some very broad questions from all three of them and ask, in the same order as mentioned, you to limit your presentation to roughly 15 minutes, and that would then leave us a good lot of time to have a discussion afterwards. What I would like to ask you from the outset, all three of you, is, first is a very simple and broad question: what you do? What does your organization do? What is done by the military? What is done by our government services? Secondly, that your countries are developing offensive cyber capabilities. This is a very diverse audience here. Could you please explain to this audience how they should feel safer because of that? And the third question is the what we have heard all morning already, domain and NATO. So if the Hesse state and government will declare, recognize cyber to be a distinct domain, fifth domain of warfare, what does that mean? What does that change in NATO? What it should change in NATO? How do you prepare for a coalition cyber operation and whether countries will contribute to it? I think, of course, there are so many other questions related to the same topic. But without further ado, I would ask first Edwin Coustillier to take the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At the beginning, I was Admiral Coustillier. I was in charge of cyber defense for the French forces since 2011. Sorry for my very bad English, but I am a true French native speaker. I have to answer very quickly to the first question. What is my job? My job is digital combat, like other combat components. It is a pleasure for me to be here again this year for the CyCon in Tallinn. I would like to thank the CCOD COA for having me on this stage along with your close partners. This year is a very specific year for France, very challenging and very decisive. The 13/11 Paris attacks, both terrorists or outside. Our president says that France is at war. French forces are at war around the world, mainly in Africa and also in the Levant area. And this war also finds ramifications in cyberspace. Daesh has good skill in defending their information system and a real expertise in digital media. They develop also hacking techniques, but at the moment at a very low level. They are massively present on social networks in several languages and use it to spread its violence and propaganda, recruit new members and gather new funds. Daesh has a real strategy in cyberspace. In their ideology, digital jihad is as important as traditional jihad. In cyberspace, as in any other domain, we have to take back the initiative against Daesh, ACMI, ACPA, or Boko Haram. It's the same face or the same ideology. They use the same assets. I speak a lot about Daesh because France is in war, but also I not forget also all the other threats, and mainly that are state-sponsored, mainly from your great neighbor for the East. Following Paris attacks and a new boosted budget for cyber operation with the military programming law, we are building up a new structure at the French Ministry of Defense. The structure will be current with your main partners. We are proceeding very quickly, but step by step. And we should end up with a complete, unified cyber command in the next months. This is a result of all the work that has been done in the past 6 years to recognize in France cyberspace as a new domain and to deploy our troops on this field and obviously to implement operational process and a true full spectrum targeting process from non-kinetic up to kinetic. So far, the French Ministry of Defense effort for cyber can be summarized with a single figure for the 2014-2019 period, €1 billion invested in equipment. As an example, the main power of the Khalid is my cyber defense center for defensive purpose only, is growing by a factor of 8 times during this period and will supervise all the different security operating centers that we have been created inside the Ministry of Defense and all services. This strong and fast evolution is also passing by setting up new structure and organization, like a digital space operations center in charge of preparing, synchronize, and driving defensive and offensive cyber as well as information digital operation. With this center that I am able today to exercise the charge of operational control of all the military cyber operation for France. We are also starting recruiting your first people for your national cyber reserve aiming 400 people, operational experts and team managers, and a pool of more than 4,000 young engineers able to be deployed in case of major cyber crisis in your homeland. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General. Hans?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for providing me the opportunity to speak here and provide some insights on the Dutch situation. And according to what Admiral Costiero already said, what is my job? Well, it's digital combat as well. Ladies and gentlemen, cyber operations are not special nor unique. It's something new. Modern society and contemporary armed forces are depending on well-functioning digital networks and systems. Various threat actors, however, are willing and capable to exploit system and networks vulnerabilities to attack and harm our society and our armed forces in, by, or through cyberspace. Consequently, this dependence on IT also influences military operations. It's the cyberization of military. In warfare, information has always been key. In modern warfare, the complexity of the information is increasing, characterized by volume, velocity, veracity, and variety. Information about your location, your allies and your enemy's location, information of targets, stocks, plans, movements, it's all essential information for military commanders. And also the information in weapon and sensor systems. All these are also equipped with digital controllers. They're vulnerable as well. And because of the digitization and the value of information, information itself is a target. Our systems are vulnerable and our potential opponents will make use of it. Digital components are often cheap and easy to get. Even less technological advanced opponents will have the ability to harm our systems. Cyber threats could come from traditional opponents, but also from new actors. State actors or non-state actors, such as Syrian Electronic Army, Cyber Berkut, Cyber Caliphate. But they will also use digital components to communicate and share information themselves. They are as dependent and vulnerable as we are. The responsibility for a more secure cyberspace lies with all players in the global information society, from individual people to businesses, organizations and governments. Cybersecurity measures must be balanced with social and economic growth and freedoms. The Netherlands has chosen to further develop its military cyber capabilities, not only for defense and protection against the existing and future threats, but also as an operational military capacity. In the defense cyber strategy from 2012 and the update of the strategy in 2015, we first focused on strengthening and hardening the cybersecurity and enlarged the cyber intelligence capacity. Currently, we are building up the operational cyber capacity. Within the Netherlands Armed Forces, the cyber capacities are under command of various organizations. The cybersecurity and cyber defense units to protect our IT networks are the responsibility of the Joint IT Management Organization. The cyber intelligence role is executed by the Defense Intelligence and Security Service. Military police is responsible for law enforcement, for cyber law enforcement, and for the operational capacity, which includes the offensive capability. The Netherlands Defense Cyber Command has been established. The mission of the Cyber Command is to contribute to the freedom of maneuver in cyberspace and to the fighting power of the Dutch Armed Forces by the preparation, training and deployment of operational cyber teams. These teams will provide integrated military operational cyber capabilities in support of the Dutch Armed Forces in the full spectrum of military cyber operations. They will plan, coordinate and execute as part of a joint task force cyber operations, from defensive cyber operations to offensive cyber operations, with direct effects or supporting effects. And I just told you that there are different bodies within the armed forces with a cyberspace responsibility. Next to the obvious roles, protection and intelligence and operations just mentioned, we identified a coordinating role for all .pmfl factors as well. And my command coordinates and facilitates the cyber activities and capabilities within the Dutch MOD and with military and civilian, national and international partners. Furthermore, the command has to attain, disseminate and manage cyber expertise for the whole Dutch Armed Forces by contributing to education, training and exercises. Regarding cyber operations, in the Netherlands we defined 6 different versions. Some comparable to what allies have defined, some are new. And I give you the 6 just as a thought. Cybersecurity operations. They encompass passive and defensive measures and focus on protection, prevention of damage and, if needed, restoration of the broad range of IT components. Cybersecurity measures form a baseline guaranteeing freedom of action and effective use of cyberspace by our armed forces. Basically, it's the use of firewalls, intrusion detection systems, monitoring of network traffic, etc., etc. You all know it. But you have also defensive counter-cyber operations, actions to neutralize active threats within your own network. In general, this is about proactive countermeasures with a defensive intention, which are taken for detecting or obtaining information about cyber intrusion, a cyber attack or impending cyber operations, or for determining the origin of an intruder's operation. So DCCO does not extend beyond the Netherlands MOD perimeters and is generally aimed at terminating specific adversaries' malicious cyber activities to preserve the ability to use friendly cyberspace capabilities and protect networks and systems and the data therein. Some adversary actions or preparatory actions can trigger us to actively defend networks or systems outside the perimeter of Netherlands MOD networks. These are called offensive counter-cyber operations, military cyber operations executed in response to adversaries' attack, exploitation, intrusion or other effects of malware, including launching preemptive and preventive counter-operation against the source of that threat. The fourth kind of cyber operations are cyber intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance operations. Cyber operations at a lower level which have the sole purpose of collecting general data or information regarding other actors' activities in the cyber domain. This does not include the activities of the Defense, Intelligence and Security Service. Supporting cyber operations are small-scale operations in support of other, most tactical level activities in peacetime, crisis or conflict situation. Due to its versatility, SCO are particularly useful in relation to support the information warfare capacities, psychological operations, deception, operation security, lawfare and electronic warfare. And last but not least, offensive cyber operations. These are combat operations, either supporting an operation in another domain or executed in cyberspace only, originating from, passing through or having effects in cyberspace to achieve a military objective. Because in a military operation, you are planning to achieve a certain effect, to support an activity in the physical domain to achieve an ultimate military goal. And physical offensive actions taken within military operations are needed to affect the capacities of an opponent within the operation and to give commanders the opportunity to gain success in their mission. So weapons are used to achieve military objectives. Nothing new. This applies also in the digital domain. That is why the Netherlands includes the option of offensive cyber actions in military operations. With cyber operations, we are not introducing anything new. They must be integrated in military missions and become just another tool in the toolbox of the mission commander. When developing military offensive capabilities, we should focus on using it against legitimate targets and mitigate negative collateral effects, which means that emphasis should be put on planning, decision-making, logging, testing, training, and so on. Until now, NATO has made considerable progress in the efforts to integrate cybersecurity into its planning processes, but more needs to be done. The recognition of cyberspace as a domain at the next summit in Warsaw will give the opportunity to enhance the robust and resilient cyber defense capabilities which are required to support missions and operations. Adding cyber capabilities to NATO's doctrine will increase its power in modern and future warfare. The Netherlands doesn't see any legal restrictions to recognize cyberspace as a domain. The current national and international legal framework is applicable to cyberspace as well. The consequences of recognition will be mainly conceptual and doctrinal. Because cyberspace is integrated within the physical domains, it will also have implication on doctrines in these domains. And for sure, cyber operations will need a set of dedicated ROEs. They should be integrated into the standard set of ROEs. In my point of view, it's not required that NATO will develop its own offensive cyber capacity. A number of member states are developing cyber capacities, and like other offensive capacities, for example, fighters, armored brigades or frigates, cyber teams or units could be part of force contribution to a mission. The decision to participate with a cyber team to a mission is a national political decision. Cyber is considered as an integrated and integral capability of the Netherlands Armed Forces. The Netherlands Forces usually operate in a multinational environment. Military cyber operations should be planned in a combined and/or joint environment using regular decision-making and operational planning processes. Given that threats are multifaceted, civilian and military approaches in protecting critical cyber assets must be strengthened. These efforts should be supported by research and development, for example by the Netherlands Defence Academy, as well as closer cooperation between governments, private sector and academia. Greater defence cooperation also means breaking new grounds with respect to planning, acquisition, training and logistical support. And it means that we must align our collective requirements and national priorities. It means that we should not shy away from innovative and creative partnerships in and outside NATO. Here a next step is required. We should stop talking about cooperation. In this field we need each other and we should get it going. Nobody can do this alone. And cyber, it is nothing new. It's something new, it's not something special. So that what we are used to do in the other domains, we should do in cyber as well. Thank you for your attention.
James.
As the more observant of you will have noticed that I'm not Lieutenant General Kevin McLaughlin from US Cyber Command. He sends his apologies for his inability to attend today, and I hope you accept me as a poor substitute on his behalf. So my name is General Jim Hockenhull. I work in the United Kingdom's Joint Forces Command, and my job title is the Director of Cyber, Intelligence and Information Integration, which is something of a mouthful. So because we love acronyms in the military, that's abbreviated to DCI-3. The problem is that no one can ever remember what DCI-3 stands for. My function is to command and direct the UK military cyber forces to maintain force elements at readiness and to plan and integrate cyber operations into our military operations. I also lead our capability development across all lines of development, so in training, education, personnel, information, doctrine, organization, infrastructure, and logistics. And the aim being to create an integrated and complete cyber military capability. And I'm the senior responsible owner for our Defence Capability Development Programme within the cyber domain. Of course, none of this is possible as an independent entity within the UK government. This is executed in partnership across government and with agencies in order to make sure we have the most coherent capability for the UK, and for the UK to then offer that capability when engaged on military operations in partnership with others. I also lead the Ministry of Defence's cyber policy development within the UK Ministry of Defence, across the UK government, and with our international partners, all of which comes together to explain why I was attending the conference and then to be surprised that I'm sat here talking to you. In the UK Strategic Defence and Security Review announced in November last year, the roles of the UK Armed Forces in cyberspace were restated. Firstly, to have strong cyber defences so that we can maintain our freedom of manoeuvre. Secondly, to project power in cyberspace, just as we do in other operating environments. Thirdly, to assist in the event of a significant cyber incident in the UK or with allies. And fourthly, to respond to a cyber attack, just as we would respond to any attack, using whatever capability is most appropriate, which may include cyber operations. In structural terms, the Strategic Defence and Security Review created a new organisation, which is the Joint Cyber and Electromagnetic Activity Group, known as the JCG. Why? Because we love acronyms. This has a one-star commander, and he works to me. And what we've brought together is our military cyber intelligence, and our electronic warfare capabilities together into a single organisation in an attempt to bring coherence across both cyber and the RF spectrum to ensure that we've got the most capable military support possible. Now, in our Strategic Defence and Security Review, the United Kingdom government allocated £1.9 billion to a national level capability development programme over the next 5 years. And this builds on £600 million allocated to the UK's National Cybersecurity Programme from 2010 to 2015. We will also create a UK National Cybersecurity Centre later this year in an attempt to simplify our existing structures across government, to ensure that we can share information more effectively, and also to manage incidents in the UK. And for the Ministry of Defence, we will work closely with this centre. If you add the spending which core cybersecurity spending is executed within government departments, in addition to those national programmes, those activities to protect our networks and ensure safe and secure online services, the UK government's total cyber spending will be more than £3.2 billion over the next 5 years. Now, our greatest challenge within the military, and I would imagine this is similar across other areas, is to attract, recruit, train, and retain a highly skilled cyber workforce. Now, we are refining within the military our cyber career stream, and we're testing all new recruits joining the military for their cyber aptitude. And we're also developing our reserve capability. And it's in the reserve where I believe we're able to add capability to our forces. Our reserves come from the cyber industry, from academia, and from former members of the military. They bring significant skills with them, and they require little or no training. And we can offer them demanding and interesting employment. These are not part-time servicemen and women, but these are extra-timers. They bring extra benefit to our forces, and they also gain skills and experiences which enrich them, which they can also then take back to their employers. In 2015, the Global Information Security Workforce Study estimated that a global cybersecurity workforce shortage will widen to about 1.5 million by 2020. Now, against that context, we have a significant challenge. Henry Kissinger wrote that for most of history, technological change unfolded over decades and centuries of incremental advances that refined and combined existing technologies. Even radical innovations could over time be fitted within previous tactical and strategic doctrines. Tanks were considered in terms of precedents drawn from centuries of cavalry warfare. Airplanes could be conceptualized as another form of artillery, battleships as mobile forts, and aircraft carriers as floating airstrips. But what's different today is pace. And it's this revolution that extends to every level of human organization. In the military, we're often accused of preparing to fight the last war. And then, when engaged in conflict, we adapt our force in being to transform it into the force that we need. Now, this approach requires time, but the pace of the information age offers us no such luxury. Network technologies are an intrinsic element of our lives, and with that comes vulnerabilities and opportunities. But from those vulnerabilities, threats emerge. This means that for the military, cyberspace is an operational domain. George Osborne, the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, said, "We need to ensure that our military are equipped to fight the wars of the 21st century. That means they must be prepared for hybrid conflicts, played out in cyberspace as well as on the battlefield. A 21st century military has to operate as effectively in cyberspace as it does on land and sea and in the air." Our commitment to 2% of our gross domestic product spent on defence means that the UK can invest in a military which is cyber-trained, cyber-secure, cyber-enabled, and with the ability to fight in every domain. We need to be able to defend ourselves from all threats, and the UK government has sent out a clear message that we will defend ourselves. But we will also take the fight to those that seek to do us harm. We are stepping up our defences and the means to ensure that attacks on Britain are not cost-free. The ability to respond is a vital element of defence. This takes us to deterrence, which is too large a subject to cover in these brief remarks. But a crucial element of deterrence will be to establish norms in cyberspace. I note there's a workshop on this later today. We must ensure that we destroy the idea that there is impunity in cyberspace. And those nations that mean us harm need to understand that we will defend ourselves robustly and that we will have the means to do so. We've clearly stated that we will use our capabilities in a responsible way and in accordance with international and humanitarian law, and we support the development of international norms of behaviour. Kissinger again said, "It will not be possible to conceive of international order when the region through which states' survival and progress are taking place remains without international standards of conduct." I've already mentioned the UK's approach to cyber as a domain of operations, and we are encouraging NATO to adopt this framework. Doing so will bring significant benefit. It will allow coherent planning and integration of cyber into mainstream NATO operations. It will help improve cyber defences and enable and sustain freedom of manoeuvre. NATO is at the heart of UK defence policy, and we want to play our part in developing and maturing NATO's approach to cyber defence. Allies, including the UK, should secure their cyber defences through capability development, capacity building, education, training and exercising. Bringing those nations together through training, together on exercises such as Cyber Coalition and the CCD-COE Lock Shields exercise are great examples of working together to promote common tactics, training and procedures. As our understanding matures, these concepts will be able to be codified into doctrine, and this will enable all NATO nations to work more effectively in and through cyberspace. Now, I would conclude with a vote of thanks to Sven and the CCD-COE for their work in developing our thinking on these issues. But I would note that there are those that would seek to turn problems and issues into competition. But what I would ask is that we all focus on solutions. Government, military, industry, academia, in a dynamic and demanding partnership to achieve success for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, James, and thank you, the panelists. And James, thank you also reminding us about the maze or jungle of acronyms that military people
are so fond of. Before joining CCD-COE, I was working in MOD for nearly 2 decades. So that jungle is very well known to me. My favorite acronym in NATO glossary, official one, is I don't think that we use it anymore. It's no fun, N-O-F-U-N. Do you know what it means? So no first use of nuclear weapons. And thank you also, James, for pointing out the norms development, which is, I think, a very important part of a legal and policy work in the future. Those of you who are heavily interested in the matter, at the CCD-COE booth outside, we have books on international norms development, which we published, I think, 2 months ago, which is a collection of articles on norms development. Maybe a couple of pointers looking back at the future, what NATO has done when it comes to cyber. I mean, as you know, NATO until now is only concentrating on its own military networks. It will happen, probably it will be changed after the Warsaw Summit. But at the Wales Summit in 2014, 2 very important declarations were made by the heads of state and government. First was that international law does apply to cyberspace, which in a way was a vindication at the highest level possible to the work facilitated, funded and organized by the CCD-COE called the Tallinn Manual Process, where the international group of experts have come together and looked at the existing international law and its applicability into the cyber conflict. And the group is working now on the 2nd volume of that. It will be published by Cambridge University Press at the very end of this year, at the very beginning of the next year. I think that will be a major event. Stay tuned to that, especially if you are a lawyer specializing in international law on cyber and cyber. The second monumental decision by the heads of state and government at Wales was that cyber attacks can become grounds for Article 5, collective defense of NATO, which of course is I would say, the logical continuation of a previous part that international law does apply also on the cyberspace. I think this is so basically, in terms of where NATO has developed in last years, I think those actually were conceptually very big decisions. Now, moving to a domain, and I think conceptually everyone agrees that, cyber is a domain. And we have done that research a long time ago. I mean, in 2009, there was actually one paper submitted to CCD-COE and CyCon with a title of Information Sphere Domain by Patrick Allen and Dennis Gilbert, who argued that cyber is a distinct domain of warfare. They were looking at what does it take to be a domain. Now, when we look at what does that mean for NATO in the future after Warsaw, can I ask you, the first question is, whether, in your opinion, NATO will have, in some foreseeable future, a cyber component command? Let's say we have an air component command, we have a naval component, maritime component command, we have land component command. If cyber is a domain, would that result in that? And I will kick on in the same order as we were speaking. Edward, please.
Please. I think I was being not very politically correct. My answer is no. Why no? Because I think that I think we don't put under the command of NATO some offensive capacity. And I think that it will be very important that NATO recognize cyber as a new domain. But when you are dealing with a cyber operation, you are dealing on the first step in order to protect. You have to protect your assets. What are the assets of NATO? The assets of NATO are the internal NATO assets. It is Obviously, it's not NATO that have to protect the French infrastructure of the French military infrastructure of the French submarine, of the French aircraft, because we can share intelligence, we can share the threat, we can coordinate the procedure. On the other way, it's a little bit like for the special forces. We can, inside NATO organization, to be clear on targeting process, to be clear to define the objective, to be clear to define the effect of cyber supporting NATO operation. For that, we have to define some targeting process and to define how to integrate in the special forces, how to integrate cyber support to NATO operation. It's different to create a component. And for that, I believe that we are not clear today to go to give to NATO the responsibility of through component, like we have a maritime component, an air component, or something like that. For me, it's too soon. I think it's each nation, when we have to use cyber supporting operation is very sensitive. It's very difficult to use and to have the guarantee of the effects. But this is my personal answer.
Well, actually, I fully agree with the previous speaker when we speak about today or tomorrow. But the day after tomorrow, I'm not sure. I think when we look 2 or 5 or maybe 10 years ahead, it might change. And warfare in cyberspace or in the information domain will become more and more important, will become more crucial, maybe even more crucial than warfare on land, sea, air, or space. And then it might be needed to have a cyber command within the NATO command structure. I don't know. So not now. Right now, I do not expect, and in future, I do not expect neither that NATO will develop its own operational capabilities. It will make use, as I stated before, it will use the capabilities of member states, but to command it, yeah, it might need a organization, but not in the foreseeable future. And in cyberspace, the foreseeable future is very short.
James.
I suppose in order to make it interesting, I should disagree with both of the other panelists. I think we've got a real challenge. And the real challenge is that we're trying to do 2 things that might seem mutually incoherent. It's almost like in 1984, George Orwell wrote about doublethink, the idea that you can have 2 thoughts in your head at once, which are mutually incoherent, but you can honestly believe in both of them at the same time, which is a difficult thing to do. But in this space, I think we're talking about acknowledging cyber as a domain, and our usual way of process would then be to say, well, if we acknowledge it as a domain, then we'll build a headquarters, and we'll make sure that we give it the right level of focus and attention. But within the cyber domain, we also need it to be integrated into all of our operations. So the idea that cyber will stand as a discrete entity, and that will be responsible for cyber warfare in some description, and it's in some way separate from operations in land, sea, air, space, I don't see as credible. So we've got 2 competing pressures, and believing in a domain, I don't think necessarily takes you to the idea that it automatically means more structure, more organizations, more generals, more admirals. Not that having more generals or admirals is necessarily a bad thing, although it probably is.
More admirals, yes.
So my view, I think, is that we're still in the foothills of some of this thinking. So I wouldn't like to leap to a conclusive answer on a future structure or not. But we need to have a rigorous debate around what this domain is going to mean, so that we can understand what the implications will be. But my instinctive thought is that I recoil at the idea of creating ring-fence structures which take on responsibility which means that in some way cyber is someone else's responsibility. And everything we've heard from the opening remarks in the keynote speeches before coffee, and what we've heard in the remarks from the other members of the panel, is that this is an integrated activity. And we should be wary, and we should really test the benefit we would accrue from creating a new structure. We should test that against the damage that might do to a kind of integrated effect of where we need cyber integrated across all of our operations.
Thank you very much. I will now open the floor to questions. Raise your hand, you'll get a microphone. Please state your name and affiliation, and if applicable, ask from a specific panelist or then all panelists at the same time. Who would dare to ask a first question? I can ask a first question for sure. This is going to be an easy one. Hans, and we have another one here in a second. But let's start from you, sir.
Brigadier General Duchesne, Netherlands Defense Academy. I was intrigued by your comments, and I'm very well aware that it is for the discussion's sake that you disagree with your two colleagues. But listening to your answer, springs to my mind that there are services and commands dedicated to a domain, like land, air, naval headquarters, and so on. So, and they quite often operate in an integrated and a joint way. And if I listen carefully to your response, it seems to me that you have a different set of way of organizing and coordinating the cyber capabilities with the other services. So am I right in that impression, or are you hinting in some other direction, and do you, as a consequence, foresee the end of dedicated headquarters dedicated to the other domains as well? Because you seem to stress integration, which sounds very reasonable looking at your job description. Sounds very reasonable to me.
Okay, so military personnel are very well known, I think, for being decisive, even when they don't really understand. And I'm going to perhaps act out of type and say, I don't know. I think what I do know is that I think things are different. And the idea that we would automatically default to the same way of doing business that we've done previously in how we've organized ourselves, I think that to slavishly adopt an old way of doing business in a new paradigm, I think is a dangerous thing to do. Now, having a cyber command may turn out to be the right thing to do, but at the moment I'm not convinced that that necessarily is the right way to go. I don't think that because of that change, necessarily your follow-on proposition drawing perhaps what you saw as an inference from my remarks that therefore other forms of headquarters all have their sell-by date and should all go. I don't necessarily think that's true either. Inevitably, in military terms, we can't have a sort of an anarchic operation where we take it in turns to be in charge. There needs to be some structure in order to enable military operations to be effective. But I'm very open to the idea that cyberspace may challenge our ways of doing business, and a kind of a 19th century style construct or a 20th century style idea of componency may not be the right thing as we go forward. And I think that we as the military, government, academia, industry, we should all be engaged in that sort of debate in order to make sure we understand what the implications of this will be. Where we make problems for ourselves is where we draw some form of historical analogy and try and fit that historical analogy into our current circumstances and into the future. It's a bit like map reading at night. When you're map reading at night and you get yourself a little bit geographically dislocated, you look at what you can see and you convince yourself that it fits to the map and you can work out exactly where you are. What we need to make sure we do is we don't take a conventional way of doing business and take that forward into what may well be an unconventional future, because we may find ourselves in a difficult place. So it's a long answer to your question, which is really, I'm afraid I don't know. But what I do know is that we've really got to think hard about this rather than reach for an easy solution of just doing what we've always done.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to chip in on this issue? No?
Just a point on the organization. But when we are speaking about Unified French Cyber Command, it is a very specific organization that will be very, very, very integrated with all the other domains. And we can separate cyber for the other domains. A part of the cyber can be used independently, mainly the offensive, or is a little bit like special operation. But all the other part is fully integrated with the other domain. And and today in France, you know, we have a new Pentagon. So the name is a French Balargon. In this new French Ministry of Defense, we have a specific building mainly for the operational matter. In this building, we have all the services: Navy, Air Force, Army, Space Command, intelligence, supporting military, special forces. And in this area, we have an area for cyber. All the G3 are working all together, and this is a guarantee that the cyber command is fully integrated with all the approach of the military. This is a global approach, and we have in mind to define global effects and cyber take its place, defensive and offensive and digital psyops.
Thank you very much. Hans, you touched upon the collateral damage in your opening statement, saying that we'll be very careful, train and experiment carefully and so forth. Well, I mean, looking at the collateral damage or cascading effects, whatever we name it, let's say if we are affecting a target with a bomb, it's well measured, the collateral damage around it. If you use the cyber effect to the same effect, meaning that you are affecting the target not with a bomb but with a code, how do you define and measure that? Because that might not be necessarily limited to this surrounding. Is there a conceptual way what you have been wrapping your heads around?
First, I think we should try and do our best, as we do in conventional warfare, to limit the damage and to try to avoid collateral damage. And that's the same as so far. And that means that by developing a cyber capability, you should be very careful in the design. You should log what you're doing. You should test it. You should make a risk assessment. So if you build your malware or whatever kind of offensive capability you design, you should already in the design phase make sure that collateral damage is not possible. And that is the large difference between a military offensive capability and, for example, the way criminals act. They don't care. They just send out a phishing mail to 1 million people and get reaction from 1% of those. And so on and so on. You know all about that. So I think that there is not a real difference between the physical domain and the cyber domain here. And you should be also take into account what is exactly collateral damage. Is collateral damage that there is somewhere a piece of software left in a system, or is, and what is actually is collateral damage, is that there is a loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof. That qualifies as collateral damage, and not just a piece of software somewhere left.
James.
So I think we've seen over the course of the last century and the early years of this a focus on precision of the execution and delivery of military effect. The difference, I think, in addition to those comments, is that cyber has a temporal distinction. So where a kinetic strike has a finite nature to what it does, it destroys what it destroys in place. But of course, there's the opportunity with cyber effect of gauging the duration that effect might take place. So there's a temporal dimension which may, in fact, enable us to be more precise with the use of cyber effect. Now, that's not to say there aren't the sorts of challenges which have been alluded to in terms of cascading effects, but with the appropriate rigor which we apply to our kinetic targeting, applying the same level of rigor to our cyber operations, we have the possibility, I believe, of being more precise in time than perhaps we're able to be in the kinetic space.
I think I fully agree with you, obviously. But one important fact is the tempo effect. The tempo is more important because when you cyber attacks is not using an arm. Cyber attack is building a capacity, and we need to have time to build this capacity, and we need to begin cyber operation some weeks before the final effect. And this is a very different approach and we have to be able to deal with this on the targeting process.
Right. Any questions from the audience? Please, here in the second row, lady, microphone, please. Wait for a microphone, please.
Thank you very much, Generals, for being here with us today. My question concerns definition. We see many definitions in national strategies of cyberspace, often defined as a network system. My research at Harvard University focuses on control systems. I'm very interested in knowing whether you consider control systems, whether it be water, power, electric, nuclear, a different domain or treated differently from cyber, and whether or not you incorporate in your own command, in your own definitions, control systems alongside of cyber, or whether it's treated distinctly. Thank you very much.
Who would like to pick it up?
Well, the answer can be short.
Yes.
There's no distinction. Control systems are part of cyberspace. All digital systems are, whether they're connected to the net or not. And yes, we look at control systems as well in my command, because weapons and sensor systems do have control systems on board as well. And if I can do something there, I can prevent the opponent of using those systems.
It's exactly the same in France at the level of the governmental agency, at the level of Ministry of Defense. When you have an IP address, you have the cyber. And more than.
So in terms of definition, I think I would agree, and we look at not just on networks, but also our weapon systems and platforms and the risks that they potentially are exposed to. But perhaps not a definition within cyberspace, but as I said in my opening remarks, we're seeking to ensure that we don't bound ourselves to a sort of IP space, but in fact many of our systems potentially have vulnerability which may be through the radio frequency connections in the RF spectrum as well as through IP. So we need to be very broad in our understanding of where our vulnerabilities sit and how those vulnerabilities might be exploited, and therefore how we must seek to try and protect them.
Hans.
And actually, your question brings me to something else, and that is when NATO is recognizing cyber as a domain, I think one of the first questions to be solved, or first issues to be solved, is the definition question. That we all agree to the same definitions, and that we're all, when stating something, think about the same thing and talk about the same thing. So basically that will be an advantage, an early advantage of recognizing cyber as a domain, that we talk about the same things here.
Thank you. Let's move to deterrence. Whether deterrence works in cyberspace. Let's say deterrence in a kinetic world, or let's say in nuclear warfare, means that of course you need to show your opponent that you have a capability. You conduct a test. You need to show that you are able to deliver the effect. You conduct an ICBM test. Meaning that your ability to deter by striking back has to be credible and demonstrated. Now, James, you briefly touched upon the question of deterrence in your opening speech by saying that one part of the answer is in enormous development. Meaning that this is something what kind of international community does not allow some specific ways of behavior. Of course, the deterrence can work through denial, can work through being able to deny the opponent anonymity, meaning attribution. It can mean striking back in kind and in time of your own choosing. Is there anything else? How does it work? And in the cyberspace and looking, future domain and all that. James, please, could you start from you?
Okay, so, I mean, this is, I think we're still in the kind of foothills of some of the debate around deterrence. And I think we again, it goes back to a remark I made earlier, perhaps, that we need to not fall into the risk of kind of lazy analogy, of thinking that we can take a model of a particular type of deterrence and we kind of drape that over cyber. And whilst undoubtedly there are lessons to be learned, but there are undoubted challenges. The asymmetry of cyber creates challenges in terms of deterrence. I think there are a range of broad issues which we're as yet in the absence of this plays into the broader debate onto norms and behaviors of trying to construct a concept of deterrence in the absence of any degree of order is an incredibly difficult debate to have. So I think those two elements are going to have to advance in parallel in order to enable us to understand the deterrent effect that we can have. But undoubtedly, I think from our perspective in the UK, our cyber capability is part of a broader deterrent effect. It is part of our full spectrum approach. And we, as any nation would, reserve the right to use those means at our disposal in order to counter those that mean to do us harm. And the possession of that broad range of capability has a deterrent effect. And cyber plays, and will play increasingly in the future, a part in that.
Fully agree.
Thank you very much. Questions from the audience? Do we have? There's one hand in the very, very back. Two, yeah. Let's start from one and then take another one. We'll take you both. Don't worry.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sergej Buka. I'm a researcher at Leiden University in the Netherlands. First, thank you very much for the 3 great presentations. I've got 2 questions, one for Admiral Coustelier. I think it was last year, April 2015, that there was a large cyber attack, a hack on TV5, whereby several TV channels were forced offline for a few hours. Unprecedented, I think it was in media landscape. And all fingers pointed to Islamic State, Daesh, in the first days and weeks. But 3 months later, it appeared that it was actually a Russian-based advanced persistent threat that was responsible for the hack. And I was wondering how this has affected thinking in Paris. My second question is for General Hucknall. And if I understand correctly, a lot of technical, or all technical capacity still resides in Cheltenham. And I was wondering how the military ensures that it gets its fair share of what it needs, considering that there sometimes can be conflicts of interest between intelligence and the military, with the military wanting to destroy or influence an operation, and intelligence maybe wanting to keep the source intact to use it for future operations. Thank you.
Very much. Start with Arno, please.
For the first question, I am not able to give you the answer because TV5 is not under my responsibility. But on the open source, yes, we are speaking about APT28, and some reports suppose that APT28 was linked with Russia, but it's only reports. But also it is interesting because APT28 we have many indices or many clauses of this sort of attacks. I think that every day in some open source publication we are speaking a lot about APT28. So this was very interesting. It is interesting also to discuss about APT28 regarding to the deterrence, how to deter APT28. It is interesting how to deter cybercriminality. This is an important way. To deal with the intelligence, in France now we are working of intelligence-oriented cyber. What I mean is the intelligence that that people who are working in the cyber cell need to conduct their action. And we have a doctrine for that. And these are in charge of or give them some directives to different intelligence services in order to give us this sort of intelligence. Also, this sort of intelligence is a very dual intelligence because a large part of this intelligence was published in open source or in large company like Cipatec, Kaspersky, or other one. And this intelligence is very large. And for us, the most difficult is to have the capacity to exploit all the information and to take the more accurate clues concerning or regarding Ministry of Defense is this very large, big amount of intelligence and information.
So James, a tricky one on who's and how will decide between intelligence gathering and operational needs.
Yeah, thanks, Sergey. Really helpful question. And I'll try and do my best. So firstly, I'd start by saying that the partnership between Cheltenham and the UK military is closer than it's ever been. And that's evidenced by the fact that I co-chair some programs with staff from Cheltenham in order to achieve a national effect. What I would say is that, of course, the challenge isn't different. This isn't unique to cyberspace. The challenge of doing something or not doing something where one action may be disruptive to activity in a different area is something that we face all the time. It's true over any source of information and any action that we might want to take. And it's crucial that when we do this, that we observe problems from a variety of perspectives. So it's very easy when confronted with a particular activity, and I want to take an action, to limit my perspective to the context of that action in isolation, and then to make judgments. But actually what we need to do is to observe those problems from a variety of perspectives. And we need to be able to step back and see that problem in context in order that we don't do something as a short-term imperative which actually creates a longer-term problem. And I think that the partnership which we have established with our colleagues in the agencies now means that we're much more able to have a full and frank discussion than ever before, and there were full and frank discussions in the past, but now it's based on a much closer relationship that enables us to have those debates and to be able to understand the perspectives and imperatives across the board. So I think my answer is that I recognise the challenge, but as with all challenges, the closer the relationship and the closer the partnership, the easier it is to overcome those individual issues, ensuring that regardless of your proximity to that problem set, that you're able to take yourself into a variety of focal lengths when you look at that problem, from being close up to the problem, but also to be able to zoom out and look at the broader context.
Thank you very much. And we will take the last question. There was another hand at the very end, 2 hands before up.
Hello, my name is Gail Kim. I'm a performance auditor with NATO. I just want to say thanks again for your participation in this panel discussion. It's been very informative. My question is more of what your views are, and it's not specific to anyone, but your views on currently, we talk about information campaigns or disinformation campaigns by third-party groups like, let's say, ISIL. And then you also have attacks on, let's say, GPS and cell phones. So you have information warfare, you have spectrum warfare, and then you have cyber domain discussions. So my question to you is, should there be some sort of discussion or consideration on the convergence of these kind of 3 seemingly disparate disciplines into some sort of common approach or discipline or doctrine? And if so, to what extent does NATO play a role in that?
Very well. Start. Who wants to pick it up? Any volunteers?
Well, it is an ongoing discussion, at least also in the Netherlands, about the development from cyber domain into information domain, into influencing operations, into the question how to tackle the hybrid threats on information. And basically, cyber is a small part of that. And as you stated correctly, there are many more information-related capabilities which you should bring together either virtually or in an organization. And you should look at it in an integrated approach, which means cyber can contribute to your PSYOPs operation. You can, by defacing a website with very simple action, you can achieve an effect, a PSYOPs effect, and it might not be activated by or instigated by the cyber guys, but by the PSYOPs guys who ask the cyber guys to help them. And the same applies for EW, and actually the fact that in UK the EW and cyber is now in one unit shows that yes, we have to look into that, and it will be part of the NATO discussions as well.
James, no?
So for us, for the moment in France, we have not a lot of doctrine debate, but we are mainly using all assets on a more pragmatic way and with a very big global approach. Depends of the level. If you are on the theater, if you are on the field, you have a complementarity on cyber and electronic warfare and PSYOPs. If you are at the strategic level or a operative strategic operation producing tactical effect, you can use a little bit the same. It's not very clear, but we are using all the assets on the pragmatic way in order to produce an effect. The main concern is to define what are the effects what we want to produce.
So I think picking up on the Admiral's last comment, that it's all about the integrated effect. It's about what you're seeking to achieve. We can have endless debates over organizations and structures and a whole variety of arcane, rather pointless discussions, or we can start from the point of saying, what are we seeking to achieve? And how are we going to integrate those effects in order to maximize our achievement? So it would be remiss of us to think that we're having a cyber effect or an information effect and that somehow these are isolated from each other. So we've got to focus on the integrated effect, and then we should allow the sort of the principle of form follows function. So let's work out what we're doing and the function we're seeking to achieve, and then let's enable the organization to be created to enable that effect to take place. And I think if we start from the other end of having a discussion around our structures, we run the risk of solving the wrong problem. When actually what we need to be focused on is how we're going to have effect, both in operational terms and in defensive terms, within cyber and the broader domain, how those integrated effects are going to be achieved, and then how best we can organize and structure ourselves to be able to realize those effects.
Thank you, James. Form following I think it would be a very good guide for us in the future. I would now give us an opportunity to say some closing remarks on whatever topic you would like. So basically speak up now or be ever silent until the next year's CyCon, when we will be going to have again the Cyber Commanders panel. Let's start with a reverse order, James, from you. Okay. Is there anything?
Damn, I was rather hoping we were going to go in the same order, but you give me some time to think. So I think I'll probably conclude by saying two things. Firstly, a shameless advert for a cyber symposium, which we're going to hold in the UK on the 19th and 20th of October in London in partnership with RUSI, looking at cyberspace and the transformation of 21st century warfare. And I hope many of you will consider the opportunity of joining us. And that plays to my final point, which is that this is all about partnerships. So this is not about cyber commanders expressing views. This is about partnerships which we execute within our own nations. And we in the UK draw upon the world-class capabilities of others across our government. And by being able to work in partnership across the UK government, we're able to generate the sorts of effects that we believe we need for operations now and into the future. But that partnership is not just within the government, but that partnership is with industry, with academia, with anyone that has a voice to play, a voice to raise in the debate, and a part to play. And that partnership is so important. So events like this and events like our symposium in October are really important, but also is the kind of day-to-day engagement with individuals. The thinking in this area is still immature. And there is the opportunity for all of us to play our part in shaping that future. But we do so in partnership. And I would ask from a UK, but also from a NATO perspective, that you reach out to us in the same way that we will reach out to you in order to engage in that debate, to ensure that we get the right outcome as we move forward. So partnerships, to me, is absolutely the key for our operations in the military domain, but in our broader cyberspace, it's all about partnerships. Thank you.
Very much.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And partnerships and cooperation is key in this. We can't do this alone. We need nationally and internationally work together. And actually, we need to do something together, which means that we have to take real steps by exchanging information, by cooperating in programs like MNCD2 and MCDC, like exchanging personnel, like defining the cyberspace, and at the end, or maybe at the beginning, recognizing cyberspace as the fifth domain, as the domain where we work in. And realize that it is not something new, it's not something special, it's something new. Which means that you shouldn't be afraid of it. You should realize that we have gone through this already a number of times, and now we're looking ahead to a new road. The only thing is the pace of it. It will go much, much faster than any development in the past. And that means that we have to react faster as well, and that we do not exactly know where we stand in 5 years. And maybe in 5 years we look back and say, hey, what we've done so far was not correct, we need to go another way. And that's not a problem either, because we're learning by doing. Thank you.
It's difficult for me because I fully agree with my fellow. But my conviction after 5 years in my office, in my job, that now cyber is really a new component. But this new component we have to learn, to combine and to integrate with the other one. Sea, Special Forces, Air Force. But the core of the approach is the effect-based approach. And this is, I think, is a key of the structure, the key of all the organization of the of this component. And also the other point is the multicultural approach. Sometimes cybersecurity with too many technical. Cyber defense is multicultural. We have to put in the same place civilian and military, and to put people from intelligence, people from cyber technical security, and through operational people was able to manage all the operational process, targeting process, and something like that. And the other challenge is the main challenge is the human asset and the human skill. And this will be the main challenge for all the cyber defense structure.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the closing remarks, and thanks, Hans, for reminding us the pace of change we are witnessing. When you look back into the history of humankind, then let's say the revolution which was came through the application of fire, that took many hundreds of thousands of years to reach, the whole of mankind, or the most of mankind. The agriculture revolution took a couple of thousands of years. Industrial revolution took 100, maybe a couple of hundreds of years. Now we are looking already in decades. Things are changing rapidly, and I think this has been a very exciting panel. Thank you, Richard. It's exciting because we are at the beginning of a new road. Whether the old concepts way of looking at things apply, we do not know, and I think this is makes this a really exciting topic to have been here. Before I would ask the audience to launch into applause in thanking the three cyber commanders, two housekeeping things. First is, when you are going to have lunch, take your stuff, take your bags and papers, because the rooms will be rearranged. As you know, the morning sessions we have keynotes, in afternoon sessions we have free breakaway sessions, so take your stuff, otherwise, it's hard to locate it later. Second is, of course, be back at 1 hour's time, 1:30, in your respective room where you want to listen to one of the breakaway sessions. But now, gentlemen, thank you very much. It was a really good job what you did. Thank you. Very much. Hans? Some basil into your life, and more basil. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Listen here, got some boys that play something real nasty horns.